Good morning, afternoon, and evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our continuing series of webinars where we try to educate and update you folks on new emerging technologies and companies. My name is John Bay. I'm a co-founder and managing partner of Fundstrat. Today, we're going to introduce you to one of the best exchanges, crypto exchanges in Asia. MaiCoin is a leading crypto exchange in Taiwan with 67% market share. Today, you will hear from our friend and founder and CEO, Alex Liu. Just as a way of background, Alex is also a very good friend of the firm. Besides being CEO and founder of MaiCoin, he is the founder and CEO of Amis Technologies and Max Digital Assets Exchange. His previous positions include roles at Hitachi, Samsung, Siemens, and Qualcomm. 7 years ago, Alex left Qualcomm to found MaiCoin, Taiwan's first digital wallet, crypto exchange, and digital asset services platform. MaiCoin was also a pivotal contributor to Blockseer, a leading crypto forensic and real-time scoring technology for compliance and law enforcement applications. Alex is truly a pioneer in this space, and we're happy to have him today. Alex has a bachelor's and master's degree in electrical engineering from Stanford University. Before we get started, my partner and head of research, Tom, will make a few introductory remarks. And today's webinar will be moderated by our colleague and head of crypto consulting, Sean Farrell. There will be a Q&A at the end of the webinar. Use the button at the bottom of your screen. If you have further questions and would like to inquire about either investing in MaiCoin or opening an account with them, feel free to contact us. As usual, we will be sending out replay information. And as always, on behalf of my partner, Tom, and all of my colleagues, we would like to thank you for your support and business. Feel free to email us with any suggestions or thoughts. Have a happy and healthy holiday season. I will now turn the mic over to my partner, Tom. Thank you very much.
Hi, and happy holidays to everybody. You know, there's only a couple weeks left in 2021. And I think this webinar with MaiCoin is really a great way to sort of recap the year. But I wanted to kind of give you a couple of comments. I mean, first, I just wanted to give you our thoughts on the market overall, and then my connection and sort of my perspective on MaiCoin and Alex. In terms of markets, I know it's been a bit of a jagged year, both for crypto and equities, but that, that herky-jerkiness really is just a function of all the conflicting impacts from policymakers, the virus itself, the Fed, and really investors' questions about, what is a financial asset? And I think a couple years ago, most people would have actually said it was bonds and stocks are speculation. It really looks now more like people are referring to stocks as better sort of places to store value relative to bonds. And, people call it TINA. But I think increasingly, especially among a younger generation, crypto and digital assets are in some ways more appealing as a store of value and actually as an asset class compared to equities. And it has a lot to do with personal governance, that people don't necessarily want, a CEO to make, from some private jet to make decisions for them in terms of how shareholder value is created. And I don't disagree with that. So we continue to think you need to have somewhere between 2 to 5% of your assets allocated to crypto. And 5 years ago, we would have said 1%. But now that crypto assets are close to 1% of total addressable assets, we would want to overweight that. That's why we're at that 2 to 5% level. And it doesn't have to be, layer one things like owning Bitcoin. I think that anything that actually captures value, that when you bridge from traditional fiat into crypto, whether that's an exchange or a payment rail or a DeFi project or even an NFT on-ramp, those are going to capture value, maybe potentially at a faster rate. I mean, even a Bitcoin miner. I mean, these could actually capture value at a faster rate than a layer one blockchain. So I think it is important for investors not to just only own Bitcoin. You know, we still think Bitcoin's important, or Ethereum, but it really is looking at other projects, whether it's actually a crypto project or an equity. And that brings us to MaiCoin, because I think this thing stands out for a lot of reasons. But most importantly, if you want to understand crypto, it's not about what's happening in the US. Crypto, I think, has flourished far longer in Asia and is much more sophisticated than it is in the Western world. And part of it is that crypto is truly useful out there. You know, whether it's people's sovereign identity, or storing their own wealth, or trust of governments, or just even simply access to banking. And I met Alex really in my sort of earliest days of looking at crypto. Alex and I were just talking about this because we had a dinner out in Taipei. We had a mutual friend, Thomas who is an advisor and on the board of this project. And I was pretty impressed by Alex, not only because of his knowledge, but he had a really good sense for where things were in crypto. I mean, just a situational awareness in Asia. And you only have to look at the current leadership and board of advisors for MaiCoin to understand that Alex is really pretty plugged in. I'll just give you some names of advisors, see if you've heard of them. This guy you only need to say his first name, Vitalik, right? We got Charlie Lee. Charlie Lee is not related to me. He is the creator of Litecoin. So I think, if you had to say, okay, why should you be paying attention to this? MaiCoin has a great exchange, as John was saying. It's making a lot of money. They've got Ami, which is a technology platform. But at the end of the day, Alex and his team are going to really be on the cutting edge of what's happening in crypto in Asia, because they really have their finger on the pulse and they have a huge market share. And so whether that's going to be a creation of NFTs or an NFT marketplace, or DeFi, or if it's payment rails, or if it's staking, whatever it ends up being, I think these guys are going to be sort of at the front end of that and really with a lot of share. So I'm just going to turn this over to Sean to give you a much more fulsome overview of these guys.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate the introduction. And don't want to monopolize the time of this webinar. Definitely want to let Alex run through the presentation we have today. But just to echo some of those sentiments, Tom had touched on the Asian markets and how crypto is honestly a product of a lot of the Eastern world, so to speak. And yesterday we saw there was that big hearing on Capitol Hill related to digital assets, and you're not sure who here had caught that, but over the past 12 months, it has been a rocky relationship, to say the least, between the U.S. government and crypto industry. But my overall takeaway was very encouraging. I think we've seen a lot of political leaders here start to step up and recognize the tool of freedom, democracy, self-sovereignty that crypto provides. And I think that is particularly poignant here with MaiCoin as a leader in the Asian markets, as a standout, this beacon of crypto values. So I think that's something very important to keep in mind. Obviously everyone here is very interested, as Tom had mentioned, in the assets themselves, but we also like to emphasize how important the skeleton and the bones and the on-off ramps of the crypto industry is. Because while myself or somebody else is fine operating in the decentralized economy, there still needs to be these useful interfaces between, legacy markets, legacy market participants, and the decentralized world. And that is obviously where exchanges step in and offer their services. MaiCoin, they have taken a very diligent approach to building their product. As Tom had mentioned, their market share is, depending on how you measure it, anywhere from 60 to 70% of the Taiwanese market. And that has put them in this position to, leverage their standing to develop new products in these emerging spaces, such as NFTs, staking, DeFi, which is a big reason why, we feel pretty good about their, near to and long-term trajectory, quite frankly. And so, with that, I want to turn to Alex and let him kind of run through things, and hopefully we can touch upon more of these points in the Q&A section.
Thank you, Sean. It was a pleasure to be introduced by John and by Thomas. Greetings to you all from Taipei. It's a little late in the evening, so if I skip a beat here, hopefully you'll know why. But the presentation I am about to share here was created by Sean, so first kudos out to him. I will spend as little time on the sort of formal material as I can, and then leave as much room for Q&A as possible. But first, a little bit of etymology. What is MaiCoin? Well, in English, it clearly sounds like MaiCoin, like the possessive. But in Chinese, both the romanization for buy and sell is a different intonation, but it's all spelled MAI. So we were really gunning for that double entendre even from the beginning 8 years ago. And it turns out in 4 days that we will be coming up on the 8th birthday of MaiCoin. So much to celebrate. Not only are we still here, despite much market turmoil, but actually I would go as far to say we're thriving. I'll give you a quick lay of the land. Under the umbrella of the MaiCoin group lies the original brokerage, the buying and selling, the liquidity provision that we started with operating in 2014. In 2018, we branched out to an exchange. So we were pooling local liquidity here in Taiwan and matching orders that way. In between those two, in 2016, we teamed with a few financial institutions here in Taiwan to create AMI Technologies, another double entendre. AMI is a Aboriginal tribe here in Taiwan, but clearly it's also the French word for friends. We thought we were in the business of making friends with blockchain technology, and that's what led to that naming. In 2017, we invested and took a minority stake in a regulated crypto hedge fund in Hong Kong. It has the 4 and 9 licenses from the regulator there, and it was one of the first to be sanctioned to actually trade crypto on behalf of institutional customers. Our operating team, so Yoda is our VP of engineering. He was a contemporary of mine at Stanford. The founding team, a lot of the technical team came from Stanford or Silicon Valley backgrounds, but most of our operating team here were drawn from a banking background. So Sophia, Minghui, and Rex all came prior to their current positions at MaiCoin from financial institutions. Our board of directors and advisors, Tom had made some mention of. There's Thomas Hu, who is an early investor and the CEO of Kyber Capital. He's the reason I'm here with you guys. He put me and Thomas and later on John Bay in touch. Leo is a relatively recent addition to our board. He joined earlier this year. Prior to that, he was the head of the American Chamber of Commerce here in Taiwan. And prior to that, ran BlackRock's Taiwan operations for 6 years. Lastly, we have a representative of SBI, which is a large Japanese financial group. They took a sizable stake in our company back in 2018. Kano-san is their representative to our board. Our advisors, Vitalik, I first met him in early 2014. This was before their ICO and clearly before their mainnet launch. We brought him to Taiwan first in early January of 2016 and really seeded the Ethereum market here. We were the first to list ETH in later part of 2016. And it's just, created manifold innovation here in Taiwan. And, the COVID restrictions notwithstanding, Vitalik makes very regular trips to come visit the community here in Taiwan. Charlie, the inventor of Litecoin. I was actually introduced to Bitcoin by Charlie's elder brother, Bobby. We were roommates actually at Stanford together. Early in 2013, he sold me my first Bitcoin for 400 RMB. You'll notice that it's RMB, which is about 60 US dollars. Both he and I were living in Shanghai at that time, and he tried to convince me to stay on in Shanghai to start what would become BTC China, BTCC for short. After spending about 4 days and nights looking through the Bitcoin source code and running Bitcoin D, the original daemon, on my own, I came to the conclusion that the mainland government would not take kindly to this technology, which involved, number one, finance, and number two, no intermediaries. And that's when I made the admittedly non-obvious choice to decamp to Taiwan, where I was born, but had never spent much time to do Bitcoin. And so here we are, almost 9 years after that. And, our line of business is strictly prohibited on the mainland, but here we are in Taiwan, which is obviously a much smaller market, but we're thriving in this market. So I think that was, in hindsight, the right choice for me to start MaiCoin here in Taiwan. Danny is another contemporary of mine from Stanford. He was my technical co-founder. So the original platform was something he spent the better part of a year in the second half of 2013 and early 2014 building before we started services in the middle of 2014. And then last but not least, on our board of advisors is Ken Wilcox. He's a good friend of mine. We also got to know each other when he was heading up a joint venture for Silicon Valley Bank in mainland China, in Shanghai, with Shanghai Pudong Development Bank. He has since returned to California, but he and I keep in regular touch, and I see him when I'm back in the Bay Area. So I think whether it's our management team or our board of directors or our advisors, you'll see that we have a pretty eclectic mix. I think there's an international flavor to it, but there's also a sort of diversity in ideological or temperamental slants. Vitalik is very much on the deep end of the decentralized universe, as we all know. Whereas, Leo and Kano-san, they come from traditional finance, as does Ken Wilcox. People like Thomas and myself, I think we're both of an age as well as of intellectual persuasion that, we have some degree of ambidexterity between those two worlds. And I think that ambidexterity has stood us in good stead over the years. That's what actually makes me so excited about the coming years, where we can navigate these two worlds, the regulatory world, the suit and tie world, and the wide open sort of DeFi and NFT world. I am convinced that teams that possess those traits, shall inherit, if not the earth, then at least this industry. I'm not going to go through these point by point, these milestones over the years, but we've had, I'll summarize it in this way, both technical milestones, for instance, the primary consensus algorithm that JP Morgan used in their fork of Ethereum called Quorum was developed by our AMI team back in 2017. We were also the first to hook up to convenience stores here. So that's more of a retail facing thing. So, we've had accomplishments both in technology as well as on the market side. Okay. Now, some of our shareholders, some of our partners, I mentioned SBI, the Japanese financial group, and Kyber, the early investor. But we also have financial institutions as shareholders in the AMI entity. So Taishin and Fubon are some of the largest financial holding companies here in Taiwan. In June of 2020, so about a year and a half ago, the National Development Fund, which is a 6% shareholder in TSMC, and so has a lot of dividends to spend every year, became a shareholder in AMI as well. So, once again, I think we're as comfortable with these type of people as we are with, people like Vitalik. So, all right. So when it comes to the service, the product, and some of our performance metrics, I think you'll have seen this before in some other context. I mean, our brokerage, MaiCoin, we serve up about 24 coins. The fees that we charge are on the order of 50 basis points. So, about a 1% round trip spread. Over the past 5 years or so, this business has exhibited roughly a 60 to 70% CAGR, and we think this type of growth will continue. When this service began to help the local market mature, this is when we decided to launch the exchange. So it is an order book, order matching service. The fees here are significantly lower than on the brokerage. They're about less than half. So on the order of 20 basis points between the maker and taker. But in the last 3 years, this has exhibited similarly strong growth, where between the two platforms, we have about $400 million of customer funds under custody. And, I see very little reason, especially given the demographic tailwinds that Tom Lee mentioned, why this type of growth cannot continue. But when it comes to, diversifying revenue streams, and really, I would call this mainstreaming, right? I mean, the few dozen, even the few hundreds of fungible tokens out there, are what exchanges like us got their start on. But what we're seeing right now, as far as the mainstreaming of crypto, of blockchain, I think it's going to be driven by the technologies and services that the AMI team has developed. So one is institutional staking. This is something that I'll speak to in a bit more in the following slides. But the second is a foray, a very successful initial foray, I may add, into NFTs. This is with a platform and service called Cubic, and I will tell you more about it after I talk more about staking. When you look at the local savings, the deposits in the banking system in Taiwan, for an island of 20 odd million people, there's somewhere between $1.5 and $2 trillion worth of savings here. I mean, that's a massive figure. Most of it is sitting in very low yield, very safe, or probably unsafe. I agree with Tom's observation that bonds look increasingly silly by the day. But anyways, this is an extreme search for yield that we have in the local savings market. That's why we think there's a massive opportunity to channel those funds into what we call institutional staking. So some of you may be aware that there are high yields to be earned in the DeFi world with things like proof of stake staking, automated market makers. If you provide liquidity, you can also earn a very healthy yield. And so, we coming from an institutional background with the technology in custody to safely hold on to these, increased flow of funds, we think we can do a very healthy business channeling these funds into DeFi projects. Just this morning, I had a call with John from the Sushi Swap project. He happens to be in New York right now. And this is something that we're on the cusp of launching. So basically using MaiCoin with AMI custody services and participating across the board in high yield DeFi projects. Okay. This this slide, I actually, would like to draw your attention to the third column, the NFT column. Now, since this report was published at the third week of November, and here we are kind of in the second week of December, we've had an absolute explosion of activity on NFTs using the Cubic platform. The Cubic platform has two parts. There is a wallet, which simplifies the purchase of NFTs. You can actually swipe a credit card instead of having to manage gas and navigate MetaMask. But right now, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, what we've seen an explosion of activity on is actually on the creation. We have a Cubic creator. Think of this service as a Shopify for NFTs. So just as over the last decade, Shopify, this Canadian company, has built an absolutely massive business enabling the e-commerce storefronts for all types of vendors, right? If you're Louis Vuitton, you're a high-end brand, you don't want your bags to be listed on Amazon or on Taobao next to counterfeits, right? You want a very nicely curated and very presentable storefront, and Shopify has been enabling vendors such as that to do exactly that: fulfillment, payment, etc. That really hasn't been done in NFTs. So I was just commenting that over the Thanksgiving holiday, I think Macy's, they have their Thanksgiving floats. They made NFTs out of them. I'm guessing that was a very customized, hands-on process, and this is not scalable to thousands, hundreds of thousands, and eventually millions of vendors and individuals, right? Social media influencers are going to get in this game. They're not only going to sell branded products, they're going to sell NFTs, and they want a sort of one-stop shop to let them set up, online stores for NFTs. So Cubic employs some cryptographic technology we developed. The primitives are something called threshold signatures, and we wrote libraries that implemented that. I'll summarize this by saying this is a non-custodial wallet. Basically, it has all the benefits of a traditional custody solution, but we're not managing the keys for the customer. All right. So this is as safe, but it's a multi-signature solution. But for regulatory purposes, NFTs are not digital currencies as financial regulators will recognize them today. And because we're not holding the private keys for the customers, we can claim to, how do I put it? We can take a sort of lighter approach to KYC and AML, right? So this regulatory vector, coupled with the absolute, Cambrian explosion in NFTs that I think we're seeing around the world. I'm guessing you're seeing this in North America and in Europe. We are certainly seeing this here in Taiwan, in Asia. I mean, just in the last few weeks, we've signed up actually over 60 customers that are issuing NFTs. These are gaming customers, these are athletic teams, these are food vendors, you name it. These are artists. I can't think of a better way to actually move into 2022. Now, granted, a lot of these NFTs are going to be, they're not all of them going to be high quality. That's the polite way of putting it. But we will, do our best to sort of weed out, the shadier projects. But I mean, I just think that given the amount of activity and the sort of easy to understand nature of NFTs, that this is what actually in the coming years is going to really mainstream crypto. All right, the last few slides gives you a bit more color on the local market, but this raise, it's a Series C for us, is all about actually stepping out of Taiwan. So we are actually making good progress in Southeast Asia with a financial institution in Singapore, with a set of internet companies. Think of them as, the Robinhoods, the PayPals, the lending clubs of Indonesia. Just as Robinhood and PayPal have crypto-enabled their business models in the past few years, so too do these folks in Indonesia plan to do so. And we're in talks to be their liquidity and technology provider. So Taiwan here is, we are at less than 10% penetration for a 23 million population. This compares quite poorly to, our neighbor to the north, South Korea, which has a population roughly double our size, but their penetration is 20 to 30%. So at this point in time, South Korea's market for crypto is, several times larger than here in Taiwan. So the glass half full view of this is there's plenty of headroom here in Taiwan to grow, especially given the amount of savings, as I pointed out in an earlier slide. So the stock market in the last few years, as well as the currency, has been strong, but that does not prevent people looking for alternative places to park their wealth, and that's something that as our own metrics have demonstrated, we've been able to capture here. A little bit about the local competitive landscape. Actually, once again, since the time that this report was published a few weeks ago, our market share has actually inched upward. We're actually pretty clear of, we're over 70% now. This is in light of our closest competitor, BitoEX, actually last Friday having some pretty public, pretty negative news. Basically, their co-founders have split. Their CTO ran off with their private keys, and this is obviously, to say, a distressing situation. I don't engage in Schadenfreude here because we are in a glass house, and what they say about throwing stones. But this has at the same time accrued to us. Much of their volume and user traffic has actually accrued to us. The third player here is a very distant third, and whether it's by these sort of quantitative metrics or on the compliance side, I will say that they're actually severely challenged. Okay, the last few slides I will talk about the regulatory context here. Just as Sean mentioned, the folks on Capitol Hill kind of had to go at it yesterday. What the OCC has come out with in the last 12 to 15 months, I'm actually very grateful for because it has affected us positively here in Taiwan. OCC, allowed financial institutions to custody Bitcoin and digital assets in July of 2020. On January 5th, or in any case, very early January of this year, the OCC allowed stablecoins to be used as payment. So that has actually sort of rippled over to Taiwan, and we're taking advantage of that newfound regulatory clarity. We are the first entity here to actually abide by and fully comply to the anti-money laundering regulations, which took effect July 1st of this year. And this is specific to crypto exchanges like ours. We're in the process of working with the financial regulator to issue an STO. It's essentially a debt-backed token, relatively small, on the order of $3 to $4 million US, but we think that will open up new opportunities in the merger of traditional securities markets and this token world. I think it was Tom who mentioned, anybody interested in opening an account with us. Unfortunately, it's very difficult for us to serve, especially U.S. customers. We primarily focus on folks who are interested in the fiat capabilities of the Taiwan dollar, which almost automatically means residents, not necessarily citizens, but residents of Taiwan. And then last, and this is certainly not least, we take information security extraordinarily seriously. It goes without saying in the crypto world, but especially since SBI became a major shareholder in 2018, we spent a lot of time and money on internal processes, but also external certifications like SOC 1 and actually SOC 2. We are both compliant to, and then more recently ISO 27001. So we come, in summary, from a C5, very much on the ground, regulated approach. Having said that, we think both from a technology perspective, but also temperamentally, and not least, our connections in the DeFi world, ideally position us to bridge these two worlds. And going forward, it is those bridges that are going to capture huge commercial opportunities. So I thank you for your time. I'll turn it back to Sean for Q&A.
Alex, that was fantastic. Appreciate you running us through that. As Alex had mentioned, this is the opportunity for the audience to throw their questions in the queue, and we can tend to the really good ones. Alex, that was great. I think the one thing I really want to double click on is, your comments on NFTs. Well, I guess stepping back first, looking at like exchanges from a high level and how we're kind of looking at their place in the market and where the value is actually going to be derived long term. Right now, Coinbase can get away with charging 2 to 3% on any, transactions, because we're still early, and quite frankly, offering access to digital assets is still a very unique and value add service. Over time, as is the case with any exchange or market maker, obviously we're going to see some fee compression. That's just a natural trend of any market. And it's going to be the exchanges that branch out into offering other, what we would consider crypto banking services in these emerging areas like staking, NFTs, DeFi, that are really going to win. And I think that is what I hope the audience takes away here, is how well positioned this company is to capitalize on those opportunities. And as it pertains to NFTs, I know Alex is very, his comments were quite bullish, and but I don't think that he was bullish enough on NFTs, quite frankly. Well, a lot of people, Alex, a lot of people just see, the crypto punks and the Bored Apes in the news. Yeah. And right. They're like, what, this is this is a weird crypto native thing. Mm-hmm. But really, at the end of the day, if you break down the actual term non-fungible token, it's just basically any asset that you can secure to the blockchain that is non-fungible. And so, like, think about the real world. There are vastly more non-fungible assets than there are fungible assets.
Absolutely. I have three. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have three, quick thoughts, and
sure.
To what the points you just made. First, on fee compression, right? You consider Coinbase's 1 to 2% sort of luxurious compared to what a TD Ameritrade or a Schwab would charge on the equity side. But on the NFT side, the relevant comparison is the 20% that a Christie's or Sotheby's would charge, right, for an art auction. And so it's like, if we're doing 10%, that looks like a discount. So potentially the fees are actually much or the margins are much fatter on the artistic side of the picture. The second point is a broader point. What I'd like to kind of analogize this to is the Web 2 to Web 3 transition. So 15 odd years ago, when YouTube was getting its start, Facebook was beginning to take off, et cetera. It was not, I think, coincidental that Tom Friedman wrote "The World's Flat," right? It really did look like, apart from mainland China, which always had its great firewall, that the rest of the world was just open field for Facebook and YouTube to kind of stomp all over. Well, here we are 15, 16 years later, and the world, if it's not a bunch of valleys and death, if it's not a bunch of mountain ranges and valleys, it doesn't look quite as flat as it did maybe 15 years ago. I mean, the example I give is a former president of the United States is not allowed to use Twitter nor Facebook. So that means that sort of culture and society has sort of re-injected or come back with a vengeance. Coming back to NFTs is a question that I'd like to put out to the audience, maybe after expressing some initial viewpoints on this. The world of Bitcoin clearly is like Tom Friedman's world. It's flat, it's fungible. I mean, it's the same anywhere you go. And there's a few hundred exchanges serving that market with demonstrably very little spread or arbitrage opportunity. And that's because it's so liquid and so fungible. The question is, what is the NFT market? If it is, as you point out, Sean, it is a market of culture, of history, of preferences, of languages, does that world look nearly as borderless as Web 2, right? And so I guess, nobody's used this phrase that I know of, but I mean, I would say the last 8 to 10 years of crypto, it has been crypto one. It's been a few thousand fungible tokens and more or less the same. And there are a bunch of DeFi projects, layer 1, layer 2 tokens. But here we are, yes, I agree. Once we get beyond the crypto punk kind of world, I mean, just what we're seeing here in Taiwan is just literally a cross section of society. It's everybody and everyone that is actually in the process of issuing NFTs. The question is, will this world, be as borderless? I'm positing that not really. I mean, when Michael Jordan gets around to issuing NFTs, I agree that's going to be globally attractive. But for the vast majority of other NFTs, it's going to be much more culturally based, and culture is a local thing. How that impinges on the business case for exchanges is, I'm going to, in a self-interested way, argue that regional exchanges like ours that have local fiat capability, because creators will want to get paid in their local currencies, that have the sort of cultural connections, regulatory connections to navigate these cultural boundaries, actually are probably better positioned than so-called offshore or global crypto exchanges, which have risen in the fungible phase of this. So what I'm calling crypto 2 is when culture reasserts itself, or asserts itself, because it maybe never asserted itself before. But this is why, maybe I didn't come off enthusiastic enough, Sean, but I am super excited. I mean, I'm judging of what I've seen in the last 3 weeks, but also extrapolating. I'm saying, platforms such as ours are really going to do well in this era.
Yeah, no, I think that was well summarized. And to your point of localization, I think, right now you have these different global economies battling out on in their own respective playing fields, but leveraging each other. They both, all countries have other countries on their, theoretical P&Ls, but those interactions are derived from different societies with different structures around governance and the transfer of value. And at the end of the day, what crypto is these governance structures, right? And governance around the store and transfer of value. So to your point, I completely agree that crypto and Web3, speaking to the points that you mentioned, certainly, encourages this localization that you had mentioned.
I'll give
I thought that was a really good point.
I'll give you a slightly poignant example, which again comes from Indonesia. So some weeks back, the Islamic Council, as you may know, I mean, Indonesia is a Muslim majority country, but the Islamic Council in Indonesia came out with guidance that basically said crypto is immoral. It is against the teachings of Islam. So that's never a good thing for the local crypto market. But our plan to enter Indonesia is actually to bring Cubic there, to say this is a cultural phenomenon. We're allowing your creators to monetize their creations. And we think this is a very elegant way of sidestepping the religious issue, but also serving a real need. I mean, Indonesia is one of the largest markets for Facebook. I'm pretty sure that very little of Facebook's revenue sees its way back to the creators in Indonesia. And if we, through Cubic, are able to do that, I mean, we think we'll do good while doing well. But one last point before I really turn it over to you, Sean. This market, I completely agree with you, is going to be many, many times larger than the fungible token market, which we've been familiar with for the last 8 to 10 years. So I hope the audience is asking themselves, well, what type of teams, what type of companies are actually best positioned to capture that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point of audience questions and culture, there are a few here wondering. There are a couple of questions. First, somebody brought up the difference. You had mentioned South Korea penetration versus Taiwan. And it's an interesting question. Could you speak to maybe like the differences between the two cultures and why there is a difference in penetration there? And then maybe just more so, and then maybe just double click on the Taiwanese perspective on crypto from, a cultural and governance perspective.
Boy, given that John and Thomas are both Korean American, I should just watch what I say here. I'm hard pressed to explain this myself. I think in this regard, I actually spent a few years living in South Korea myself. I see in some of their, let's just talk about investment culture, a lot more similarities to mainland China actually than Taiwan in terms of gung ho and risk taking. For whatever reason here in Taiwan, they just love fixed income. That's why we think institutional staking is such a large opportunity, right? If we can offer much more attractive yields than traditional financial products safely, right? With some type of guarantee, we think we're tapping in. We are tapping into a $1 to $2 trillion market here in Taiwan alone. I think that from my time in Korea, I just felt that societal pressures, to succeed, to buy a house, to get settled, matched against the actual economic reality. It's actually more extreme by a good order than here in Taiwan. Taiwan, the wages are lower than in Korea, but so are the costs of living. And so, it's overall a slower pace and probably not as high pressure. And so when Bitcoin comes around, or, the various tokens come around, fewer people have that type of reaction, right? We oftentimes hear about the kimchi premium, and there's never been a beef noodle soup premium here in Taiwan. So, that's as far as I'll wade into kind of cultural observations. But it is a very real difference. And that's why, as I pointed out earlier, the Korean market is several times larger than it is here in Taiwan.
I think that's a very interesting take. And it is, to your point, it's interesting to see which societies, it seems like the more comfortable ones have more issue with crypto and getting it, so to speak, just from a very high level. And I think, we've seen that in certain pockets of the US as well, which is interesting. I think MaiCoin has done a very good job managing relations with the government in Taiwan. I don't know if there's, you want to maybe speak to that at all.
Look, there's no secret sauce there. It's just being able to see everyone, and not just the government, but all stakeholders, their side of their story, right? And there's a difference between empathy and sympathy. Empathy means you understand it. Sympathy means you presumably agree with it. And that's definitely not the case. I don't agree with many of the positions that the government takes, but at least understanding why they're taking that position allows you to potentially find some type of way to work through it. So it's true. We got the government to invest. That was a painful process, I'll tell you that. But is it worth it? Only time will tell. It was a relatively small amount, but as you probably guess, it's about the imprimatur of government investment. Same thing with the financial institutions. It's really slow and difficult to work with them, but we got them on board. And I credit Thomas Hu, our board member, for most of that. But look, we did it for selfish business reasons. We think in the long term that type of investment will pay off in terms of business continuity, in terms of the scope of business that we hope to expand on. We would like over time to offer leveraged products. I mean, not like crazy 100 times leverage, but 3 to 5x. We see in traditional markets. We see no reason why they can't be replicated legally here in crypto. We like to do security tokens, right? We like to tokenize existing, already public equities. We'd like to issue new equity, new securities, whether debt or equity, natively through a token sale. If you don't have a decent relationship with the regulator, that's hard to contemplate. One thing that was not mentioned in the report, but you will see next year, is a Taiwan dollar stablecoin. So that's something that our board member Leo Saywald is leading up for us. I mean, he brings a lot of credibility in front of the government because as the AmCham head, he dealt with the president directly. And then prior to that, as head of BlackRock, he obviously had to take compliance seriously. So when he's leading a crypto project, in this case a stablecoin project, I mean, the regulators will give him the benefit of the doubt. And we're doing it in a very conservative way. We're literally taking one Taiwan dollar and minting one token. We're not going to do anything with the Taiwan dollar. It's not going to buy commercial paper. It's not going to do anything that is actually generating yield. So you can question our business model, but
no high yield Evergrande debt, Alex.
Oh, you're talking about. Never mind. I know those people a little too well, so I won't name their names. But yeah. Okay. But you see our approach. It's slow but steady, and so tortoise versus hare, we're clearly the tortoise here. And according to the fable, at least, we know who won.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up the stablecoin endeavor, because that was also, we had mentioned the hearing on Capitol Hill, and stablecoins were a very popular topic. And in our view, stablecoins, there is this inherent conflict between government and crypto often because obviously you hear the word currency thrown around with digital assets quite often. And so governments are concerned that there's going to be this new competition with their central bank or the strength of their currency. And, we see stablecoins as this way of actually strengthening, local currencies because while it is you're actually trading in ERC20 token or whatever the standard that you use, it is, as you mentioned, backed by the US dollar and preserves the US or Taiwanese dollar denomination in trading and transactions, and actually encourages the proliferation of and the strength of a local currency. So I think that is a phenomenal thing to point out, and I'm glad you did. It's something we're pretty excited about. Speaking about tokens, we have a question here about the MaxCoin. Is there any roadmap for that coin, and is that open to US investors right now?
So I mentioned that it is difficult for us to serve US persons at this point. The roadmap for that is to find, to use it as a sort of entrance ticket for our various staking services, right? In other words, to increase its use cases. And so we hope to drive appreciation for the platform token in that way in the coming year.
Great. Awesome. So we're actually running up on time, and I think that we've gone through all of the public questions. If you enjoyed Alex's presentation and are curious about investing, you can reach out and we will put you in touch. If you didn't enjoy, I'm not sure what is wrong with you. Okay. But Alex, I don't know if you have any parting remarks or what have you, but I appreciate your time today, and I thought that was a phenomenal presentation.
No, nothing further, and thank you, Sean. I do have one question, and I think maybe we could end with this because a lot of people tend to ask, what are the things that keep you awake at night what are your biggest concerns going forward, and what do you see as a risk to your goals and your dreams and your future for MaiCoin?
Yeah. This is the force majeure clause in any legal contract, right? I mean, Sean very appropriately and eloquently pointed this out in his report. I mean, it is the geopolitical risk, right? Taiwan is not the most stable geopolitical place on the planet. Probably a close second to Ukraine in terms of instability. No, I say that with a slight smile, but it's not a joke. This is something that really the three sides, the United States, mainland China, and Taiwan need to get right, because whatever differences, if they spill into any type of kinetic conflict, all bets are off as far as welfare, right? That's a big topic, obviously, and I don't want to open that can so late in the night here. But short of that scenario, I honestly, John, don't see anything stopping us. It's green lights all the way. What we've spent the last 8 years doing is getting the tech right. Trust me, it wasn't always right. We were afraid of getting shut down, just like the platforms on the mainland were. I mentioned that the U.S. played a tremendous role in kind of setting that in the right direction. We had to deal with competitors, global ones, local ones, what have you. And here we are 8 years into this. I finally am at a place where I'm like, okay, we're standing on solid ground. And now crypto 2.0, the mainstreaming of this stuff with culture, content, it's my, not that intelligent prediction. That's not long from now, 2 to 3 years. We're going to stop talking about like issuing tokens and, that type of thing. It's just Michael Jordan did this, Paris Hilton did that, and of course you can own this. Of course you can trade this, right? I mean, how else would you do it, right? And that sort of thing. I mean, we saw that obviously with Web 1, 2, 3, but that's going to happen with a vengeance here. And, humbly speaking, we're ideally positioned to capture that. The one thing that is out of my control, unfortunately, but that could throw a wrench into all of that would be some type of geopolitical situation here.
Thanks, Alex. As you know, Tom and I are honored to be partnered with you guys in distributing our research in Taiwan, and you're a good friend of ours. We actually really look forward to visiting Taipei soon. As you know, that's one of my favorite cities. So once again, thank you for doing this. I know it's late over there in Taipei, and I'm sure we'll get a lot more follow-up questions, which we'll forward them to you, Alex. And,
no, it's yep. Go ahead, John. Yeah.
And to all of our attendees today, I want to thank you for joining us. Happy holiday season, and just a reminder that we will have, or Tom, my partner, will have his 2022 Outlook webinar on Tuesday, December 21st. More information will be going out. So please join us for that. So again, thank you. Happy and healthy holidays. And Alex, on behalf of Tom and Sean and all my colleagues, thanks for doing this today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Happy holidays, everyone.